There is a quiet strength in the pause, a sacredness that enters when all else stills. Before the storm gathers its voice, before the crowd raises its cry, before a heart pours out its pleadings, there is that breathless moment where nothing is said and yet everything is felt. In that space, in that divine stillness, something begins to stir that cannot be touched by noise or chaos. It is the breath between the beats of time, a holy hush that descends like the softest whisper of heaven. There are those moments in life when speaking seems the most natural response. The world teaches us to explain, to defend, to convince, to shout above the noise so we might be heard. But in that very effort, so much is lost. The louder we speak, the more our words can blur into confusion, drowned by the very urgency of being understood. Yet there is something otherworldly about a person who does not yield to that impulse, who chooses instead the power of the pause. To remain silent is not to retreat. It is to yield to a higher wisdom. Silence is not absence, it is presence. A deep, sacred presence that speaks of trust, of knowing, of abiding in something greater than what is visible. The pause is not an escape, it is a doorway. In the quiet space, something eternal speaks. It may not be heard with ears, but the heart knows it, feels it, responds to it. It moves beneath words, beyond sound, beneath reason. It's in the pause where eternity breathes. It is in this stillness that clarity comes, not forced, not rushed, but gently unveiled like the morning light that creeps over the horizon. You cannot pull the sunrise from the sky before its time. In the same way, there are answers that only come when you are silent enough to receive them. The most important revelations are not shouted, they arrive in stillness, clothed in peace. And there in that pause, the heart is searched, not by others, but by the eternal hand that knows every hidden cry. There is no need to explain yourself to the world, when your heart has already been understood in the silence by the one who sees. So many strive to make their case known, to prove their worth, to shout down injustice. But those who walk in the Spirit know that the most powerful response is sometimes no response at all. To pause and say nothing when everything around you demands your answer, this is strength. This is surrender to something greater than yourself. How many relationships have been restored not through clever words but through the humility of silence? How many conflicts have been diffused not by rebuttal but by restraint? How many moments of pain have turned into miracles because someone dared to wait in the pause, allowing time and tenderness to do what force and logic could never accomplish? In that quiet space, forgiveness can be born. In that hush, healing finds room to breathe. The pause is not a void, it is full of presence, full of promise. When you no longer feel the need to fill the air with sound, you begin to notice the symphony that has always been playing in the background. The whisper of wisdom, the echo of peace, the rhythm of grace. All these wait to be heard, but only by those willing to stop and listen. And in this world, so enamored with speed and sound, how radical, how divine, is the one who moves slowly, who waits quietly, who trusts deeply. Silence becomes their robe, not of shame or fear, but of dignity and discernment. There is no fear in the pause because fear clamors, it panics, it drowns itself in words. But silence, true silence, is fearless. It does not need to prove or persuade. It simply is. The pause also makes room for others. In your silence, space is created for another's voice to rise. Not all silence is solitary. Sometimes it is a gift you give, an act of love that says, I will not speak so you may be heard. In this way, silence becomes not just a strength, but a service. It invites, it honors, it dignifies. Stillness is not passive, it is deeply active, though invisible to the eye. While the lips remain closed, the spirit is at work, observing, discerning, waiting for the right time, the right word, the right move. A pause can carry more weight than 1,000 hurried speeches, and in that pause the winds shift, the battle lines blur, and sometimes the impossible begins to move. And oh, how powerful is the heart that knows this secret, the heart that has learned to wait rather than rush, to listen rather than lecture, to breathe rather than break under the weight of pressure. In the sacred hush of a moment held in silence, eternity often writes its most lasting words. True authority never makes a scene. It does not storm into a room demanding to be noticed, nor does it dress itself in the drama of loud words and wild gestures. It moves quietly, almost imperceptibly, but leaves a lasting imprint on the atmosphere around it. There is a kind of power that walks softly and still commands attention. It does not shout, and yet, somehow, every soul in the room leans in, drawn not by volume but by presence. There is something holy about it, something sacred. It's not in what is said, but in what is felt. And what is felt, deep in the spirit, cannot be faked, cannot be manufactured, cannot be imitated by mere words. We have been conditioned to equate noise with significance. The louder someone speaks, the more serious they must be. The more aggressively one defends their point, the more weight it must carry. But truth does not need to yell. It is sure of itself. It does not tremble under scrutiny. It stands calmly, confidently, and it lets others catch up in their own time. The most grounded souls are often the quietest in the room, not because they have nothing to say, but because they've learned that true impact rarely needs to explain itself. There is a kind of quietness that isn't born of fear or hesitation. It isn't silence born from uncertainty or doubt. No, this quietness is purposeful. It is filled with substance. It is backbone, resolve, and clarity. A person who walks in this kind of silent authority changes the dynamic of any space they enter. Without raising a single word, they are felt deeply. The room adjusts. Conversations shift. Hearts take notice. Not because they've said anything, but because who they are speaks louder than what they could ever say. You can feel the weight of someone who walks with true conviction. Their silence is not empty. It's not the absence of sound. It's the fullness of self-control, of restraint, of intentional presence. They do not need to interrupt, because they are not trying to win the moment. They are patient. They understand timing, and they know that sometimes the most powerful way to assert one's position is to say nothing at all, not in apathy, not in withdrawal, but in strength. A strength that refuses to be dragged into chaos or provoked by noise. This kind of influence is spiritual. It is invisible to the natural eye, but undeniable to the spirit. It works not on the surface, but in the deeper realms of perception, of energy, of emotion. It calls people to attention without a single command. It carries a vibration that makes others pause, reflect, recalibrate. It is not charisma. It is not manipulation. It is the deep echo of a life aligned with truth and purpose. It is the unshakable calm of someone who knows who they are and whose they are. Words can be twisted. They can be misheard, misquoted, misunderstood. But silence, true silence, the kind that is chosen and deliberate, leaves no such room. It allows for observation. It holds space. It reflects dignity. It communicates a message more powerful than argument. I do not need to fight for what is already mine. I do not need to prove what truth has already revealed. And I will not cheapen my spirit by spilling words into ears that are not ready to hear. When you encounter someone who has embraced this way of being, it is unforgettable. They do not rush. They do not react. They do not let their emotions speak before their wisdom has time to respond. They remain steady, anchored. Their very stillness disarms conflict. Their quietness breaks tension. And when they do speak, if they speak, it's like the room leans forward to receive every syllable. Not because the words are grand, but because they come from a place of depth, of peace, of certainty. There is a wisdom that only silence can teach, a power that is only found when you no longer rely on your voice to carry your message. When your life becomes the message, when your spirit speaks louder than your tongue, when your energy enters a room before your body does, that is true influence. It cannot be bought, it cannot be learned from a textbook, it is cultivated in stillness, forged in surrender, refined in solitude. It is the reward of those who have learned the sacred art of waiting, of watching, of withholding when it is not yet time to release. And those who walk in this kind of influence, they do not fear misunderstanding. They are not obsessed with being seen or heard. They have entrusted their truth to something greater. They know that what is real will rise, that what is right will be revealed in time, and that no amount of noise can drown out the quiet force of a life lived in alignment. So they walk in peace, not because the path is easy, but because their soul has learned the quiet confidence of not needing to win the room in order to win the moment. There comes a time in every life when the weight of words is too heavy to carry, when explanations fall short, when justifications sound hollow even to our own ears, when the heart aches with a language that cannot be spoken aloud. It is in those moments that silence becomes a refuge, not a place of defeat, but a place of sacred trust. In the stillness, when all our efforts to speak have dried up like rivers in a drought, we learn that we were never meant to do all the talking. There is another voice, gentler, deeper, truer, that begins to speak for us when we finally quiet down. There is such power in letting heaven do the talking, in stepping aside and letting something greater than ourselves rise up and speak on our behalf. Not every battle is meant to be fought with words. Some battles are won with tears that never fall, with prayers too deep for language, with silence that is soaked in surrender. We have been taught to defend ourselves, to make our point known, to fight for clarity and closure. But what if the greatest clarity comes not when we insist on being understood, but when we release our need to be? What if closure comes not from conversation, but from trust? Trust that there is a higher plan. Trust that the same divine force that spins galaxies and stills storms is also able to vindicate, to defend, to bring light where there has been only shadow. Trust that you do not have to carry the burden of proving yourself. What peace it brings to finally stop rehearsing what you would say if given the chance. To stop wishing for the perfect words that would unlock someone else's understanding. When you let heaven do the talking, you stop striving and start resting. It's not passivity, it's partnership. You are not giving up, you are giving over. You are handing the pen to the author who knows how to write endings that heal instead of harm. Sometimes, when you say nothing, when you refuse to engage in the noise, something eternal begins to echo louder than your words ever could. Your silence becomes a canvas for divine expression. It's in that quietness that the spirit begins to speak, not always with audible words, but through shifts in hearts, through gentle convictions, through sudden clarity in places once clouded by confusion. Some of the most powerful moments in history have been marked not by great speeches, but by great silences. A bowed head before the storm, a mother praying over her child without uttering a single sound, a soul kneeling in quiet desperation while the world rushes by. These are not weak moments. They are moments of alignment, where human effort ends and divine power begins. To let heaven speak means to stop trying to control the outcome. It means trusting that the truth does not need your defense, that justice is not yours to manufacture, that love can whisper louder than anger can shout. There is something undeniably holy about a person who knows how to hold their tongue, not out of fear, but out of faith. Faith that time will reveal what the tongue cannot. Faith that silence will protect what the ego cannot. Faith that even when your voice is not heard by others, it is heard by the one who matters most. And when heaven speaks, mountains move. Not because you made them move, but because your silence invited the one who can. And oh, how beautiful it is to witness this kind of trust, to see someone refuse to clap back, to resist the urge to retaliate, to choose stillness instead of reaction. It takes far more strength to remain silent and trust than it does to speak from a place of pain. It takes courage to not answer back when accusations come like arrows. But when you let heaven do the talking, those arrows fall to the ground. They lose their power, not because you fought them off, but because they could not touch what was shielded by grace. This grace that speaks when you do not, that moves when you cannot, that covers you in the places left raw and open by misunderstanding, is not weak, it is not timid, it is thunder in disguise. And though it may seem like nothing is happening in the silence, the truth is that everything is happening. In realms unseen, things are being rearranged, hearts are being softened, doors are being opened, and paths are being cleared. Not because of what you said, but because of what you surrendered. To let heaven do the talking is to live with open hands and a quiet spirit. It is to know that your story is not yours alone, and that the one who began it is also the one who knows how it should be told. It is to believe that vindication doesn't come from argument, but from alignment with a higher will. And when you are aligned, you don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to plead to be seen. You don't have to explain to be known. You can stand in the quiet and be absolutely certain that what needs to be said will be said, at the right time, in the right way, by the right voice. There is a strength that does not roar. It does not march in with force, nor does it clamor for recognition. It moves with calm certainty, with quiet grace, and it carries a weight that cannot be measured in decibels. It is the strength of stillness, the kind of strength that shows itself not in reaction, but in restraint. To be still in the midst of noise, to remain composed when provoked, to hold your ground without raising your voice. That is the power that turns the tide without ever drawing a sword. That is the victory of stillness. Stillness is not weakness, it is the discipline of a heart that refuses to be driven by chaos. It is the settledness of a soul that no longer needs to win arguments, prove worth, or meet the expectations of those who misunderstand. Stillness is the armor of the unshaken. It is the refuge of those who have learned that sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. There is something profoundly commanding about a person who, though wounded, does not lash out, though pressed, does not panic, though challenged, does not waver. In a world that equates action with success and volume with value, stillness is often misunderstood. It is mistaken for passivity, for timidity, for avoidance. But stillness is not the absence of feeling, it is the mastery of it. It is the decision to hold peace in a world that thrives on conflict. It is the conscious choice to remain grounded when everything around you is pulling at your attention, demanding a reaction, provoking a response. Stillness is not what you do when you have no choice, it's what you choose when you know who you are. To stay quiet when accused, to remain steady when wronged, to carry yourself with dignity when others speak with disregard. This is not easy. It is not the way of the world, but it is the way of wisdom, because in stillness, you create space for truth to rise. You create room for discernment, for clarity, for divine timing. While others rush ahead in haste and pride, stillness waits. Stillness watches. Stillness listens not just to the noise, but to what is moving underneath it. The power in stillness is not found in control, but in surrender. It is rooted in the knowledge that not every battle is yours to fight. Some victories come not by force, but by faith. When you refuse to be provoked, you step out of the cycle of conflict and into the current of something greater. You become an observer rather than a participant in the chaos. And in that stillness, truth has room to breathe. Lies fall away, illusions collapse, and what remains is only what was meant to stand. There is a quiet revolution that takes place inside the one who chooses stillness. They are no longer tossed by the opinions of others, no longer swayed by temporary storms. They become a presence, not just a person, a presence that steadies the room, softens the tension, silences the noise without saying a word. They walk with peace because they are anchored in something deeper than the moment. They are not looking for revenge. They are not striving for vindication. They are trusting that time and truth will do what words and willpower cannot. And it is in this stillness that the soul finds strength, not the kind of strength that wears medals or wins applause, but the kind that endures, the kind that carries burdens quietly, that forgives deeply, that sees beyond the present pain to the promise that lies ahead. This strength does not boast, it does not compete, it does not compare, it simply abides, it holds firm, it waits. Waiting is not weakness, waiting is faith in motion. It is knowing that what is meant for you will not be taken by force, and what is not meant for you cannot be held by effort. So you wait, not idly, but with intention. You stand, not passively, but with purpose. You move, not because you're pushed, but because you're led. And this posture of stillness becomes your victory, not because everything around you is perfect, but because you have chosen not to let the imperfection of others disturb the peace within you. Stillness becomes a shield, not of defense, but of discernment. It allows you to hear beyond the noise, to feel beyond the moment, to know what cannot be explained. It is in stillness that wisdom is born, not from rushing, not from reacting, but from resting in the assurance that what needs to unfold will unfold, without your manipulation, without your striving. This is where transformation happens, not only in your circumstances, but and in time, what looked like defeat becomes your greatest strength. What seemed like silence becomes your loudest statement. What appeared as inaction becomes the most powerful testimony of faith. Because when others demanded a fight, you chose peace. When others sought control, you released it. When others gave in to fear, you stood still. And by doing so, you won a battle they never even saw. The victory of stillness is not measured in conquest, but in freedom. It is the quiet assurance that you are no longer a prisoner of people's opinions, of outcomes, or of the need to be right. You are free, not because you overcame everything outside of you, but because you overcame everything within.